Let's continue that conversation right now with the guy that you see with me on the Insiders 5 days a week during the season, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights, rather, on NFL Network. It's on YouTube. It's a podcast. It's all over the place. Ian Rapoport is with us right now. Ian, thanks a lot for logging into the link even before I had to text you and remind you that this was happening right now.
Have you been riding a lot of motorcycles around L.A.?
You know, I knew that was coming. I actually walked by.
Curious, like,
there's a
people
photo.
like to ride motorcycles, and to do so, you must have a leather jacket. I just hope you wear a helmet. That's all I hope.
No, I can't wear a helmet. You got the hair. I've got to let it blow in the wind. There's a photo actually in the hall that I walked by earlier today where Aaron Rodgers is dressed exactly like this on this same show. Maybe somebody can grab that here during the course of the segment. All right, Ian, a lot to get to around the NFL. Let's start out with, we talked about this on NFL Game Day Kickoff yesterday, the Davante Adams situation. Other teams involved certainly think this is potentially going to come to a head today or tomorrow. What's the list? What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I would say coming to a head today or tomorrow makes sense. If only so, like if he's going to play for the Raiders, then I think he'll be healthy enough to play for the Raiders and we'll move forward that way. There's no need to move him if he's just going to play. If he's not going to play, and certainly trading him makes more sense now, then you'd like to do it sooner rather than later, because if he's off the team by Wednesday, then you don't have to pay $1 million in salary. All right. So doing it now, I think, makes sense for all parties. I would say the two teams to watch are the Jets, which is where Davante Adams wants to go, which is a team that has Aaron Rodgers, who I think it's fair to say could use his old friend in this offense that has looked better at times than it did on Sunday. And certainly has the cap space to absorb the contract and has the picks and maybe a player if that's necessary as well. Like, the Jets are, I think, a really good spot. That would make sense to do it now. They're back from London. Could use a little juice. And Rodgers has been recruiting him, obviously. So I think that would be one team to watch. The New Orleans Saints would be the other. They have been more aggressive when it comes to trying to trade for Davante Adams. I just don't know if that's going to be the place that he ends up going, but I do know they've made some really good efforts to make it happen.
So with a team like the Saints, Ian, and we know the Saints are always doing cap gymnastics to rework contracts and push money back and everything else, I haven't gotten the sense, and I know the Raiders have told some other teams we don't want to do what, let's say, the Broncos did 3 years ago and eat almost the entire salary to get a second and third round pick for Von Miller. The idea of a second round pick and potentially more for a guy who the new team would take on the entire salary seems like asking a lot for a player at this stage of the career with Davante Adams. What would a trade if it's New Orleans or if it's, let's say, a Buffalo, another team that would need the Raiders to make some type of concessions from a financial standpoint? What does that trade even look like?
I would say you do need to make some financial concessions. You can make it work, though. I mean, I think with the Saints could do it, right? I mean, they could for sure make it happen. I think they would need some assistance from Davante Adams as well. And I think to actually absorb the contract first, which, you have to have the space first. You can't trade for him without the space and then redo the deal. So you have to have the space first. The Saints could make it happen. They always make it happen. Kyrie does a great job. It would just be complicated. I don't know that it would be the Raiders having to pay, which to my understanding, they have not been inclined to do so. I don't think that's something that Mark Davis has ever done, if I remember correctly, and I don't think it's something that he wants to do. But yes, you would have to do some salary cap gymnastics in both places to make this happen. The Bills would be, I think, another place that would make sense. I don't know that they'd be considered a front runner, but they'd be another team that could probably use some more catches from wide receivers, especially a very good one like Davante Adams. And, these are reasons why the Jets make the most sense because they could take him on. They could do it. Now, basically, it's a 1-year deal, right? Like, I know the other 2 years exist, but they don't really exist because if they couldn't come up with a deal, then you're just going to release him or trade him, and then that team will work it out. Like, basically what the extra years at the back end of the contract give you is sort of like right of first refusal. It's basically like something to hold on to him to try to get a deal, to be the first team to get a deal done with him. So I view this more as a 1-year deal. I think every team can make it happen. Would just be easiest with the Jets.
Ultimately, yeah, Davante Adams is not going to see those numbers, which is over $36 million in 2025 and 2026. But what those effectively do is it gives the player the leverage here in terms of, listen, yeah, I'm going to be an unfettered free agent after the season because you're going to have to cut me or else do a new deal with me.
Well, it gives them leverage later, not now. Because
Correct.
Let's say he did want to go to the Jets, which he does, but let's say he didn't, they could just trade him anyway, and he would have no say. You know what I mean? It would just be for the later years, you'd want to have some certainty.
If his deal's not being restructured in advance, where he could veto it would be, hey, we're going to trade you to, pick a name out of the hat. We're going to send you to Tampa. They're not trading for him, but we're going to send you there. But you have to re-sign, even if it's a matter of taking the signing bonus and then moving on. He can go, I'm not signing the paperwork, in which case he could effectively veto it. Right. Although at that point, the Raiders could go, well, we didn't want to trade you anyway, so now you're playing here. There's still some moving parts. Big couple of days on that front. You also had elsewhere in the AFC West another story yesterday on Rashee Rice, who we all saw go down with, I think it's fair to call it an unusual looking knee injury in that game. The initial reports were, well, it's feared to be an ACL, which it makes sense based on how his leg bent and what they found. Here we are, and it's 8 days or so after that injury. We still don't know entirely what direction this is going to go. So break down the process today for Rashee Rice.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's pretty rare. I can't remember that many more examples of players who needed sort of exploratory surgery. Like, there's just not a lot of them, where usually you say, like, all right, I've seen this injury before. You can tell the knee stability, like, obviously this is an ACL or it's a MCL or PCL or whatever it is. This one, the angle, usually when it's this angle, you'd say it was PCL or LCL. And I believe there is some damage there. We'll see how much. We'll see if it's surgical. And there may actually be damage to the ACL too. And the problem with an ACL injury, and I think Jalen Phillips found this out this weekend, is almost always, if it's partially torn, you need reconstructive surgery. If it's partially torn, you need to redo the whole thing because it doesn't really regenerate like other things. But he's going to have a scope today from Dr. Dan Cooper, the Cowboys team doctor, and that will determine where he stands. It's rare. I think you kind of mentioned it on TV Sunday. There's a very small glimmer of hope. It's not zero, but it's very small that the damage is, little enough to where he could play this year. But I think most likely they're expecting several months long recovery for Rashee Rice, who really has emerged as one of the best receivers in the NFL over the course of the last 4 weeks.
The last notable player I can remember trying to play on a partially torn ACL was Ryan Tannehill, who came back and rehabbed the entire offseason. And that's a different position. Quarterback's different, but Tannehill then tore the ACL the rest of the way the first week of training camp and then lost an additional season on top of it. That's kind of the danger here, especially when you're talking about a young player with a long career
And that's
ahead.
when you turned Jay Cutler into a Dolphin.
That is correct. And I was marooned in Miami for 2 weeks, and I had the tweet that still pops up on probably a monthly basis on Instagram. Jay Cutler has passed his physical and is now officially a Dolphin. We've got some potential quarterback news here in the coming days as well, actually in several different places. Let's focus on New England, though, here, Ian, because right now you watched the games yesterday. Caleb Williams played the best game that he's played. He's gotten better, it seems like, every week. Jaden Daniels is playing at a super high level despite the interception he threw 5 seconds after Mike Garafolo texted a bunch of us and said, boy, Jaden's playing great. And then we had to live with that curse for the next quarter or so. Bo Nix also, they're winning when he's not, getting into it with Sean Payton on the sideline here. All of which brings us to Drake Maye in New England, where it would be one thing if this were like Carolina with Andy Dalton, where you're playing good enough and you're being functional. The Patriots are not functional right now. They are bad on offense, and that echo chamber, particularly in the Boston radio market, talk radio, all that stuff and Chris Brockman sitting over here and pumping his fist as we're discussing this as well. There's going to be a lot of pressure to, at some point, put Drake Maye on the field. Are we at that point now?
So there is always pressure to put Drake Maye on the field, right? And I think in New England, because that's such a vibrant radio market, there's always pressure. And I think anyone who goes to New England or places like that, there's a few of them, Philly would be one. New York is another. There's pressure every single week. So Gerard Mayo gets the same questions every single week, and he's going to continue to get the same questions until he plays Drake Maye. This is complicated. And, I've seen a lot of these, as have you, Tom. And there's plenty of these where you say, like, all right, it's time to see him. And then you go out there and it's like, why didn't you play this guy earlier? And, you see that storyline. I don't know that this is that. I mean, the Patriots offensive line is a work in progress at absolute best. They just lost their best offensive lineman in David Andrews, who handles the protection, who would have been huge for Drake Maye. They are not good. The team is struggling, I think, in a lot of aspects. And so, like, from a curiosity standpoint, as someone who likes football, like, I would be very interested in the Patriots starting Drake Maye. But it's really complicated whether it's actually best for him. Historically, there are a lot of quarterbacks who thrive because they've had to wait and learn, not been thrown out there. I mean, he played a quarter or whatever it was against the Jets and got crushed at least 2 times,
right?
And played fine, but like, was that helpful? I mean, I know it's like, there's a shot right there. There's him getting crushed right there. Was that helpful? And I don't know. And this is what the Patriots are going to have to decide. It is definitely not simple in New England for this decision.
It's never a good sign when your head coach every week, when asked about the performance of the quarterback, uses the phrase toughness. Like, that basically means, like, Jacoby Brissett is back there being an absolute punching bag, and that's enough for him to stay in the lineup. You heard Gerard Mayo's tone or phrasing maybe change a little bit this week, but you made the point about the historical trends here. Elliott Wolf, who's effectively the GM there, Lonzo Highsmith's in the front office, Ben McAdoo, all these guys came from Green Bay, where the philosophy is you draft the guy, you let him sit and develop, and then in the case of Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers, it's 3 years before they get on the field. The difference, of course, is Jacoby Brissett is not Aaron Rodgers. He is certainly not Brett Favre. He's a guy who out there right now is, getting kicked around quite a bit, but they just aren't moving the football here. So certainly going to be interesting to see how they handle that situation. Meanwhile, Indianapolis is another one that I think there's probably more questions outside the building than inside it right now. Joe Flacco, they lose that game yesterday to Jacksonville. I don't think, though, that anybody watching that game goes, Joe Flacco is the reason that they lost. The fact that Anthony Richardson was listed as doubtful, to me, means he's probably healthy enough this week to go out there. But how they handle this, particularly if Flacco keeps playing at a high level, at minimum is worth keeping an eye on, it seems.
I mean, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. And Joe Flacco, once again, is presenting problems for his starting quarterback. I mean, we saw it last year. Came off the bench, played great, led the Browns to the playoffs, obviously ended up not re-signing as they moved, obviously continue to be all in with Deshaun Watson, as they still are, and will be going forward for a variety of reasons. Comes to Indy, and I think Anthony Richardson is insanely talented. I mean, insanely talented. I don't think anybody would question that. You watch the guy throw a football one time, like, it's stupidly talented. But that's not what wins football games. And Joe Flacco, at 39 years old, has seen it all, can process unbelievably quick, is delivering the football in a way that he honestly always has. I mean, he might be playing his best football absent that, Super Bowl run. If you're Indianapolis and you have Anthony Richardson, who you believe is the franchise quarterback, who needs to play to show that he is a franchise quarterback, and I think, it's probably at the point there where there's several people in the building for job security reasons why it behooves them to have Anthony Richardson playing. And then you have Joe Flacco, who could come in at any moment and lead the team to victory, or, they should have lost that game by 12 or 14 or whatever, and Flacco leads them back and almost wins. Like, that's pretty impressive. So I don't know that it's much of a decision. Like, I don't think they're going to say Joe Flacco's our guy. Might they say, we're going to let Anthony Richardson heal a little bit,
right,
and be at 100%? Like, could do that for sure.
The problem with doing that with Anthony Richardson, though, still is he's a guy who needs to play, because he really hasn't played much football going all the way through his college career. And obviously season, he last 3-4 games. He's a guy who needs reps. It's a rep-based position. It puts him in a difficult situation if all of a sudden you're going to say, hey, we're going to roll with Flacco. Even in the short term here, certainly you can do different things with Anthony Richardson, but actually going out and playing the position in games is big part of what he needs. Tennessee also, another one. I mean, again, like I said, there's a long list of these quarterback situations. Seems like there's not an actual quarterback change there. It's still Will Levis, despite the one or two baffling mistakes that he has made virtually every week throughout the course of this season. But he is banged up. He's not going to practice today, according to Brian Callahan. What direction does that thing go in Tennessee?
Sounds like it's going in the Will Levis direction. He's going to practice, I believe, Wednesday. And then, expectation is he'll be healthy enough to go. Will Levis is, I would say, a problem that is, they're not good problems, but this seems like a good problem to have because, there are plenty of plays where you're like, this guy is the starting quarterback of the Titans and is looking good and makes plays and all that. It's really just that one play a game, like falling down, throws it behind him, pick six, like those plays. Brian Callahan was hired for a lot of reasons. And I think the sort of culture that he can bring a team was one and communication and openness and forward thinking. There's a lot of reasons he was hired. But to me, the thing that will help the organization most is that he should be able to get Will Levis to stop doing that. And if that can happen, then they probably have themselves something. I don't know what Will Levis' ceiling is going to be, but he's played well enough to where you're like, this guy can win football games. So, he also needs to play. He needs to put himself in situations constantly to just be regular and effective and just let that continue to happen. And I think, to me, does sound like this week probably goes out there and does that.
He's not a real regular guy. That's the thing. I mean, go back to everything through the pre-draft process. Obviously, different people. There's, the Mayo stuff and the eating bananas with the peel and all that. He came across to so many people.
The Mayo stuff being fake is definitely one of the most misunderstood. Everyone knows that's fake, right?
I don't think so. He has leaned into all of this.
Yeah, but it's fake, though.
In terms of he doesn't like mayo in his coffee, I'm shocked. I'm very shocked that this is a branding thing.
That is fake. I think it would, yes, a lot of that going around, but the fact that some people think is real is, I think, a problem in our society.
But the way that he comes across, though, is he is very tightly wound and he's super energetic. And I think that, for some people, they just thought that was maybe over the edge for what they wanted out of the quarterback position. The upside on Will Levis, in my mind, and granted, this is an oversimplification because he's playing right now, but it's Sam Darnold. Where Sam Darnold, you always saw the traits, you saw the athletic ability, you saw the arm. It was he would make absolutely catastrophic mistakes on a weekly basis that took your team out of games. And he's made a few mistakes here and there through the course of this season here, but it took, year 7 for Sam Darnold? It took him a ways down the line to figure out how to play within the scope of the offense. That's what it seems like with Will Levis. We all see the baffling mistakes, but there's a lot of good in there too. You've just got to somehow get through all the stuff that, hey, when you're being tackled by two guys, don't try to throw a left-handed shovel pass in the red zone on 1st and goal. We don't need you to do that. Just don't do it.
Well, or if you're trying to get a first down in the first quarter, maybe it doesn't make sense to go like Superman and launch yourself.
He probably had that first down, though. He probably, even Brian Callahan said, if he had a second angle, he might have challenged that. He probably had it.
Probably had his first down, but may or may not have detached his arm from his body, which is, you got to be, and that's part of playing the quarterback position. And I look at where Brian Callahan came from. Obviously the Bengals lost, right? But Joe Burrow is as chill and cool as a football player could literally ever be. He's like this, straight line all the time. And, he'll make mistakes. I mean, had one late yesterday, but seems never to be flustered. And I don't know that that's a reality for a lot of people. I mean, all of us try to be very cool under pressure and some handle it, better than others. But to me, that's the goal. And, for Darnold, you're right. It took him 7 years. It took him 7 years to get there to be just regular down in and down out without doing a crazy thing. Might take Will Levis some time too, but that's where you want to get to when you're being tackled by two guys, there's no hope, and you go, all right, I'm just going to go down with the ship, and we'll live to play another down.
I felt like that was a shot at me right there, Ian. Was that just look on your face, the way that you said some people handle pressure better than others? Was that directed at me, or am I reading too much into it?
No, I think you're reading too much into it. No, it wasn't. It wasn't actually. No, I was actually referring to myself because like there are times when I very pride myself on being like cool and calm, and sometimes I'm just not. Like, you get big news, you get all excited, you try to type it, and your hands start shaking. Like this is a normal thing that most people deal with, right? Like, no, of course not. It's not normal. But anyway, we all try.
All right, last thing for you, Ian. We are coming up. We are now under a month away from the NFL trade deadline. It would be 29 days away from right now. You mentioned one name. I feel like you've tried to get DeAndre Hopkins traded about 8 times over the past several years when he was with different teams, 2 different teams, whatnot. You did bring up his name again yesterday as an option for the Chiefs. We know they're banged up a receiver. Again, we'll see what happens with Rashee Rice. But what are the chances somebody of a DeAndre Hopkins ilk, if not Hopkins himself, gets dealt at some point and quite possibly to the team that's going for a three-peat?
Well, I would say when you would say of DeAndre Hopkins ilk, so like DeAndre Hopkins 5 years ago would never get, I mean, he did get traded, but his trade would be
he did get traded 5 years ago, I believe, to Arizona. Yes.
Yeah, I would say not twice. He got traded, then he got released. That would be like Davante Adams level. Where DeAndre Hopkins is now, still very effective. We've seen plenty of moments, but complimentary piece to a really good team. Like if he's going to get traded, that's what it's going to be. So there's like a couple of those guys around the NFL. He makes sense to Kansas City just because he built a relationship with them when he was a free agent. And this is sort of like, this doesn't happen that often, but remember, he didn't have an agent. So he was the one talking to like Brett Veach and Andy Reid and like the other Kansas City people. So that's why that relationship is there, because he built it, right? So that's why that makes sense to me. There's some other guys who are like veteran level, very productive, would be the final piece. Like I think there's a pretty good chance the Chiefs trade for someone. I don't know whether it's going to be Hopkins specifically because I think they'd like a cheaper option. But like if that's the best option, I think they make it work contract-wise and just deal with it.
Ian, thank you. Get back to work. See you on the Insiders podcast, which will be up on YouTube at like, I don't know what time zone I'm in, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific later today.
I don't know what time zone I'm in either.
Thank you very much. Please change your shirt before that show. Ian Rapoport.
Right. Back to motorcycle riding.
Yeah. One of the best. Yeah, I'm gonna get that photo. I'm getting the Rogers photo. Very
so basically,
similar.
he's calling you Fonzie, is what he's saying.
He's made that comment every time I've worn this jacket, which specifically is why I wore it today because we don't have the Insiders Network show today, so I thought I could avoid him, but he still got the shot at.
At least you don't have your Uggs jacket on.
That photo, you guys used that photo again like a week ago.
Yeah, I did that.
It was a very furry hoodie. I love that jacket. It's very, very hot. It is very, very hot to wear. And I've tried wearing it in my home studio. I'm like, nope, the lights are way too close.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern for free.